It's 2014. You've got all your Dota playing friends over, and you're watching the International 4 together. Newbie just beat Evil Geniuses to make it into the grand finals. You grab a snack for everybody, and you turn up the volume on the TV. The All-Star match is about to begin, and the banter is always gold.
I heard a rumor that ROTK wants you to, let's see if I get this right, kiss his ass.
Well, he does have a beautiful ass, so...
That's awkward. Oh no, we already have a casualty. Hey. 99. Go to sleep.
Hi! They just say they don't need me, so I just sleep a while.
They kind of need you, buddy, but if you want to... It's a good spot. He's not joking. Puppy, you want to get down there with him, take a nappy nap? All right. Aren't they cute? I didn't think we'd see spooning. All right, let's move down the line. Arteezy? Uh-oh.
I just have one thing to say here. This will be explosive.
You rarely have just one thing to say. Anything else?
You will see. Just 1 second.
The art of the tease. Schwan, you having fun? You ready?
No.
Legion Commander.
I'm scared.
Has everybody picked? I can't see on the outside.
It's fine. Yeah. Just tell that everything is fine.
Sniper.
Everything's fine.
Techies.
Now that's how you do a hero announcement. Techies was released into the world of Dota 2 shortly after the International 4. From the very beginning, he stirred controversy. Half the player base was excited to finally see one of the most unique Dota characters adapted into the new game. The other half shivered in fear, knowing what playing on a map scattered full of mines felt like. Techies changed how Dota was played. No longer was it 5 versus 5, but 9 versus 1. Techies versus fun. But Techies has always been a terror in matchmaking. Did that extend to success in the competitive Dota 2 scene? Today we're going to investigate how Techies changed over the years and how those changes affected his performance at the most important Dota events, the International Tournament Series. So, how good were Squee, Spleen and Spoon, the Techies Demolition Squad? Before we get started, I would like to clarify some language. Techies is a group of characters. It would be correct to refer to them in the plural. Despite that, I'll be referring to Techies in the singular. That's for the ease of understanding, as otherwise it could be difficult to follow along when talking about teams and the hero at the same time. Techies was a ranged intelligence hero and was implemented into Dota 2 on the 9th of September 2014 in the dedicated Techies update. His first ability was landmines. When used, landmines planted an invisible mine on the floor that would explode when an enemy steps on top of it, dealing significant damage to them and any enemy units in the area. This mine had 2 separate delays, an activation delay and a detonation delay. The activation delay described the moment after placing a mine during which it can't be triggered yet. The detonation delay only came into play after that. It meant that the mines didn't explode immediately when something stepped on top of them, but instead after 1.75 seconds. The mines only dealt their full damage when an enemy unit was right on top of them, while dealing half damage to units further away. Up to 20 mines could be active at the same time, with no time limitation, and they could be stacked right on top of each other. Landmines had a very low cooldown of only 10 seconds at maximum level, but they consumed a ton of mana to be cast. The mines had some funky properties. Their damage was incredibly high, starting at 300 and going up to 600. While that may sound overpowered, the damage was a unique type that wound up getting completely removed from Dota: composite damage. Composite damage was a mixture of physical and magic damage, meaning it was reduced by both armor and magic resistance. Abilities that did composite damage usually had very high damage numbers to make up for that double reduction. The mines could also be used to deal damage to buildings and provide a tiny amount of vision. Not enough to act as wards, but enough to scout out rune spawns. Finally, landmines could be destroyed by an attack, but would explode when they die. This left melee heroes with no good options to deal with them, since even if they managed to destroy them, they would still get hit by the explosion. Stasis Trap was Techies' second ability. Stasis Trap was another type of mine. They are still invisible and still have both an activation and detonation delay. However, for the Stasis Trap, both of these delays were very long, at 2 full seconds each. This meant it was actually possible to move across a Stasis Trap without triggering it. When triggered, the Stasis Trap would stun all enemy units in a 450 radius for up to 6 seconds. Unlike landmines, Stasis Trap did not have a maximum number that could be placed, and instead each trap had a time limit. This ability had a fairly low cooldown and used a lot of mana. Again, both landmines and Stasis Trap could be used to block neutral camps from spawning. There was a lot of strategy involved in finding good spots to block the camps with. Both of them also had very low cast ranges. Suicide Squad Attack was Techies' third and most bizarre ability. Techies would kill himself to deal a massive amount of AoE damage to all nearby enemies. Suicide Squad Attack had a fairly small radius in which it did its full damage, and a larger radius in which it did significantly less. It also dealt composite damage. This spell did an absolutely ridiculous 1550 damage at level 4, which made it the largest single instance of damage in the game. However, it had some downsides. The very low cast range of only 100 made it incredibly difficult to hit with it, and it had a very long cooldown of 3 minutes at level 1. Most curiously, Suicide Squad Attack killed you. While the ability did reduce your respawn time for that death by 50%, you still died. This could actually be useful at points though, as it gave Techies the option of denying himself whenever he wanted to. When Techies killed himself that way, he also denied all golden experience opponents might have gotten from his death. Techies' ultimate was another set of mines, remote mines. This ultimate shared a lot of similarities with Techies' other abilities. They were invisible mines that could be placed on the ground and had an activation delay before they could be triggered. Their cooldown was low and their damage and mana cost high. They had no limit on how many could be placed, and each of them lasted up to 8 minutes. However, remote mines worked a tad differently from the other mines in a few ways. First, they wouldn't trigger automatically and instead had to be used manually. For this, you had an additional ability that lets you pop multiple mines at once, but you could also select each individual mine to explode them one at a time. Second, remote mines had a fairly big explosion radius and cast range. This was very beneficial, as they were the only ability Techies could use from a distance. Third, remote mines gave some vision, which offered additional utility as they could act as a sort of poor man's ward. Finally, remote mines did magic damage. This made them much more powerful in sheer damage output than any of the other abilities. Remote mines also had an Aghanim Scepter upgrade that increased their damage and cast range. Techies was a weird hero, but not just because of his abilities. His core stats were just as bizarre. He had the highest attack range in the game, while also having by far the lowest attack damage. And he had one of the highest starting armor values, while his movement speed was the lowest in the game. Immediately after adding Techies, Valve realized he wasn't quite working the way they wanted him to. He was really bad. So they changed a bunch of his abilities around. Landmines and Suicide Squad Attack were changed to deal physical damage instead of composite damage, and they also adjusted their damage values to be lower. This may sound like a nerf, but it definitely wasn't. An ability dealing physical damage was much better than dealing composite damage. Stasis Trap also had its trigger radius increased significantly, which made it easier to hit since players couldn't just walk straight through it anymore. To make up for this ease of use, its stun duration was nerfed to 4 seconds max. Finally, remote mines had their vision radius reduced, making them worse at being wards, but their duration was increased to 10 minutes. Despite those changes, Techies was still pretty bad. A problem the hero had was that when he got a kill with his mines and he wasn't in experience range, he wouldn't get experience. This was actually unusual, as normally the killer always got experience no matter where they were on the map. Techies was exempted due to a quirk of mechanics. The mines were considered to be their own units, and so they would get the experience for kills, not the hero. This changed in 6.84, and now Techies will get experience for kills he got with his mines, even if he was far away. Landmines and Stasis Trap also had their activation delay reduced, and Stasis Trap had its detonation delay reduced. This made it much easier to use both abilities during fights. This change was incredibly important, as landmines now had less than a third of their previous activation delay. Something that became possible as a result was Techies using landmines offensively and in the middle of fights. On top of that, Suicide Squad Attack had its cooldown significantly reduced and could now hit Ancient Creeps and Roshan. Wherever Techies goes, controversy follows. Along with the hero, Valve released an Arcana cosmetic skin for him. This Arcana gave the additional ability to place a purely cosmetic minefield sign. To be clear, the minefield sign didn't have any actual effects, it was just a cute little thing you could put down while playing. Despite that, the community was outraged, claiming that even having the minefield sign at all was some sort of competitive advantage, which made the Arcana pay to win. It seems that either Valve agreed, or they didn't want to deal with the backlash, so they decided to incorporate the ability into Techies as a whole. Now even players without the Arcana could use it. Since at this point it became a proper hero ability, they also gave it some added functionality. The minefield sign didn't do anything by itself, but it could be upgraded with Aghanim's Scepter, at which point it turned all of Techies' mines in a 175 radius around itself immune to any sort of detection. Mines protected by a minefield sign couldn't be seen no matter what, which made it an excellent tool for protecting your mines. There were also always the mind games of it, as opponents had no way of knowing whether or not a minefield sign was dangerous until they died to it. Although generally it would be safe to assume that it is dangerous, as it had a very long cooldown. The early years of Dota 2 were quite different from the way things are today. Back then, not every character was considered a competitively viable option. I understand this sounds like I'm saying that some characters were bad, and while that is what I'm saying, there was a bit of a different scale of badness. Today, we generally consider every hero to have some kind of merit, and if they don't get drafted often, then that's because their numbers are subpar or they don't fit into the metagame. Back then, the game was split into two different tiers of heroes: competitively viable heroes and not competitively viable heroes. This pool of not competitively viable heroes consisted of characters that you wouldn't ever want to pick in a tournament because their abilities were bad on a fundamental, conceptual level. These are the heroes that would eventually end up getting reworks. While Techies had only recently been added to Dota 2, back in Warcraft 3 Dota, he had always been one of the unfortunately unviable heroes. Because of this, players assumed Techies would see no play in the competitive Dota 2 scene. However, Techies received a significant number of buffs right after being added to Dota 2, and a few teams realized just how insane his numbers were. Landmines did 300 physical damage at level 1, and Suicide Squad Attack did 500 physical damage at level 1. Physical damage spells are generally worse than magic damage ones. That's because heroes naturally build up armor and quickly surpass magic resistance's damage reduction. However, this also means that during the very early stages of a game, physical damage spells can often be more powerful than magic damage equivalents. At level 2, Techies was nuking for 800 total physical damage. If a Techies had the second level of his ultimate and an Aghanim Scepter, Remote Mines became an 800 cast range, 425 radius, 600 damage nuke on an 8-second cooldown. And that's assuming Techies didn't place multiple mines down, at which point you might be taking significantly more damage. Of course, this damage came with the limitation of needing enemies to get close enough to the mines, but these numbers were worth the effort. At the International 5, Techies surprised viewers, casters, and players alike when he proved himself to not only be competitively viable, but one of the most dangerous heroes in the entire game. Before we can discuss Techies, we have to talk about his partner in crime, Tusk. Tusk was an excellent hero at the time, and we'll talk about that in more detail in the Tusk video. For now, we're going to focus on how he related to Techies. Tusk had two abilities that allowed for incredible inter-hero synergies. Ice shards could be cast from a long range. It damaged and trapped enemies inside of a wall that they could only leave in one direction. Snowball turned Tusk into a snowball, which would then chase down his target. Once it connected, it would deal damage and a stun. Importantly, while inside a snowball, Tusk could pull his allies inside of it as well, which would allow him to reposition his teammates. Here's the combo. Tusk and Techies travel the map as a pair. When they find an enemy, Tusk traps them in the ice shards and uses Snowball to get Techies on top of them. At this point, the enemies are stunned and can only leave in one direction. The now repositioned Techies then places a landmine right on top of them, which is now guaranteed to explode for full damage. And if that isn't enough by itself, he'll use Suicide Squad attack to secure the kill. This made Tusk and Techies incredibly dangerous as soon as the game started, and gave them a guaranteed kill at level 2. Additionally, Tusk was a great hero by himself. This meant that teams could pick Tusk early in the drafting stage and then decide if they wanted to play Techies based on how the rest of the draft went. As a result, the combo came at no opportunity cost. If the game was a good Techies game, a game where you're going up against a lot of heroes that have a short attack range, that want to establish early control around the map, and that struggle against high burst damage, in a game like that, you pick Techies. Otherwise, you would just have a Tusk on your team, who was very good by himself and could slot into many lineups. This gave teams a lot of flexibility during drafting. Finally, Tusk didn't need much money, but he could use it. As we're going to see soon, Techies could make a Dota game a bit unpredictable. Tusk didn't mind that, as he was a hero that could adjust to the pace of the game on the fly. During the International 5, Techies was picked 8 times total. Out of those 8 picks, the first 5 were all Techies and Tusk. TNT, if you will. As an example of how this strategy worked out in practice, we're going to have a look at Game 2 of the group stages match between IG and Complexity. Complexity first picked Tusk and last picked Techies after seeing 3 meta heroes on the enemy team, all of which struggled against the hero. Undying could have his tombstone blown up, Bloodseeker had no way of interacting with the mines, and the only way to kill a Brewmaster through his ultimate was high physical damage. That's the drafting flexibility of the TNT combo in action. You can wait until the last moment to see if Techies is good. Techies opens the game by teleporting into the top lane and throwing down multiple landmines, setting up a trap. Unfortunately, Bloodseeker arrives just a few seconds too early, triggering 1 too few mines and surviving with 10 health. This kind of early game trap was very common. Then laning begins, and Tusk and Techies play a duel offlane, which was a bit unusual at that time. The most common approach was tri-laning, but with a support that was a bit more open in their movement and focused on stacking the jungle. However, Techies forced his team into playing dual lanes. His damage was too low to control a lane on his own, especially in a meta during which Poor Man's Shield existed. PMS was a 500 gold item that gave melee heroes a 100% chance to block 20 damage, which was a lot for any hero to deal with, but for Techies, that was all of his attack damage. His abilities were also too difficult to hit without assistance, especially when playing against heroes that are fast like a Bloodseeker or a Queen of Pain. At least for the early stages, Tusk had to be in the lane with him, otherwise he wouldn't be able to apply any pressure. This wasn't ideal, restricting one of your support's movements was actually a fairly big deal at the time. The question then remains, was Techies worth that sacrifice? As soon as TNT hit level 2, they go for a combo on Bloodseeker and easily secure the kill, even underneath the tower. This makes the Radiant rotate their lanes and Bloodseeker moves to the top while Queen of Pain comes bottom. Rotations like this always come with a bit of shakiness in the team's laning structure, and Complexity exploits this immediately with a quick combo kill on Crystal Maiden. Tusk then starts roaming on his own for a bit, while Techies stays in the bottom lane, doing his best farming impression. Tusk moving top puts enough pressure on the Bloodseeker that he gives up on that lane as well and he starts jungling instead. This in turn frees up the Dire's supports even more. At 8 minutes, TNT kill Queen of Pain bottom and then take an early tower. In the meantime, Wraith King has been enjoying free farm and has also taken the top tier 1. The Radiant simply couldn't find a good laning setup, and now the game is already slipping out of their control. They decide they need to be more careful and start spending most of their time grouped up. In the meantime, Techies is sitting in the bottom lane, pushing and farming. One of the most frustrating elements of going up against Techies was that he was impossible to kill. I know, that sounds a bit weird, since the hero spends a lot of time dead, but we need to make a distinction between getting killed and being denied. When Techies used Suicide Squad attack, he couldn't be killed, as he was killing himself. A Techies that denied himself this way would also have his respawn time cut in half, and he gave out no gold or experience bounty. None. Not even his kill streak would end. This made Techies a very effective split pusher, since he didn't need to worry about retreating. Instead of trying to escape a gank, Techies would just kill himself and completely deny the encounter. That's exactly what we see in this game. Whenever Seafrag runs into danger of dying, he uses Suicide Squad attack to deny the kill. His skill and item build is centered entirely around the split pushing idea. Maxing out landmines and Suicide Squad attack before even getting a single point into Stasis Trap, while building mana pool increasing items and Soul Ring straight into an Aghanim Scepter. The idea here is that it doesn't matter if Soul Ring drains your health pool, as you'll end up denying yourself sooner rather than later anyways, and that effectively heals you back to full. IG is now fully trapped in Techies' hell. Brewmaster is out of position for just a few seconds and immediately dies to the TNT combo. Techies then pushes top on his own, and when the Radiant comes to gank him, he infuriatingly denies himself. Instead of changing strategy, Techies continues pushing top and just denies himself again when the Radiant is forced to defend. He needs to be dealt with, else he farms too much and does too much tower damage. But IG doesn't get any reward for doing so. Worse than that, they're wasting their time and resources fighting a hero that doesn't care about dying. This style continues. He moves lanes, pushes, gets caught, denies himself. In between, he places mines in various spots around the map. When the Dire goes for Roshan, the pit is already reinforced by mines, making it impossible to contest. Techies isn't even there. He doesn't have to be. The Dire uses the Roshan momentum to push, and the Radiant comes to defend. As soon as the fight starts, Techies runs right into the middle of it, soaks a ton of abilities, and then denies himself again while the Dire retreats. While Complexity technically lost 2 heroes in the fight, Techies has already respawned, and now Radiant's ultimates are on cooldown. Complexity continues pushing, and IG have to give up the tower. Techies continues haunting the Radiant, as he gets a double kill while sitting in his base, just using the mines he has scattered around the map. He is now on a godlike streak, 9 kills in a row. IG manages to repel Complexity for a while. Then Complexity forces a fight through the top lane, which they win decisively. Techies was low on mana going into it and only managed to throw 3 of his ultimate mines into the fight, but he still did a huge amount of damage because he now has his Aghanim Scepter. The Dire then takes the top barracks and moves for Roshan again. Techies doesn't join, instead going back to the base to heal. This is fine because he already has mines down, so he assists despite not being there. Complexity then mounts a bottom push. Techies has full mana this time and has reached level 16, giving him his level 3 ultimate. He throws down a minefield sign before the push begins and starts placing remote mines on it. This creates a zone that the Radiant can't enter, as each remote mine does 750 damage. Let's do some counting. How many remote mines did Techies place and how much potential damage is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 remote mines, totaling 3750 potential AoE damage that IG can't interact with because they can't detect the mines. The entire team is here, in position, on full health and mana and with all of their ultimates ready to go. Despite that, the bottom barracks falls to the Dire without a fight because they are too afraid to initiate and cross into that mine territory. While sieging, Techies occasionally moves into the primary pushing area and assists by placing landmines for building damage. He doesn't have to worry about dying because even if he were to get caught, he can still activate the remote mines while dead. Complexity retreats after taking the bottom barracks and moves into the mid, setting up for another push. Minefield Sign has an extremely long cooldown. Because of that, Techies can't use it in this final push. Instead of mining in the Radiant space, Techies creates a safe zone for his team outside of IG's base. Remote mines are placed behind the Dire frontline, giving them a guaranteed space to retreat to. Again, the Radiant is forced to engage in a heavily space-restricted fight, and after they fail to do so, they concede. What we saw in this game was the main strategy for Techies across the tournament. Start by applying heavy pressure on the laning stage, using Tusk as your enabler. Then, transition into a farming split pusher that is impossible to interact with. And finally, secure your team's push with remote mines. This last aspect was incredibly important and is what I would describe as the hero's main contribution to any game. Techies' early and mid-game presence was still significant, but it was all building towards that pushing power, towards getting enough money for the Aghanim Scepter. Have a look at how Team Secret was using Techies to push in their game against Cloud9. Chen and Gyrocopter are sieging the tower, while Techies is setting up remote mines outside of the base. While pushing like this, Secret gets a little greedy and dives a bit too deep, so they are forced to retreat. Cloud9 Sven and Darkseer chase, but they realize they can't go too far because of the Techies mines. Secret wins the following fight and continues their push. After the top barracks falls, Cloud9 is desperate to take another fight, but as Secret retreats, they can't chase them. Techies made your pushers safe in a way that no other hero could. It's now time for what a lot of you have probably been waiting for. Let's talk about evil geniuses in C-Deck gaming. EG was one of the teams that favored Techies. However, they were the only team that would pick him without an early game enabler. Instead of using Techies to actively apply pressure on the enemy team, they relied on him as a zone controlling support for the early game. If they were given an opportunity to use Suicide Squad attack for a kill, they would take it, but it wasn't the primary game plan like it was for the other teams. AUI 2000, EG's position 4, was the perfect player for post-laning Techies. He played an incredibly greedy style of support, which was almost more akin to having a fourth core. This made him uniquely suited to playing Techies, as he always managed to somehow find enough money for Aghanim Scepter, at which point the hero enabled his team to close out the match. AUI 2000 was also excellent at using the landmines to create space for his team, something that most other Techies players put less emphasis on. C-Deck Gaming was the wildcard surprise team of TI5. They were one of those teams that put a lot of emphasis on a single player. In this case, that was Aggressive, their position 1 carry. Aggressive, surprisingly, was an incredibly aggressive carry player. As an example of this, his Phantom Lancer item build consisted of multiple early start items into Boots of Travel. This allowed him to be active around the map immediately, and where other carry players would be farming, Aggressive was leading the charge. Unfortunately for him, that was a difficult playstyle to make work against AUI 2000 on Techies, who put a lot of emphasis on controlling space. This showed in their group stages match, where EG beat CDAC 2-0 by picking Techies twice and limiting CDAC's movement. They couldn't play in their natural style, and so EG eventually overwhelmed them. The two teams met again in the upper bracket finals, but this time CDAC had learned their lesson. They first face banned Techies for both games. CDAC won game 1, but it was still difficult, largely because of AUI 2000's Naga Siren, which was another hero that could be used to control space and discourage aggression. So, for game 2, CDAC banned Naga Siren and Techies in the first banning phase and won convincingly in only 20 minutes. They finally figured out how to deal with EG. This is where we need to talk about Leshruck. During the international main event, Leshruck had a 100% contest rate. The hero was widely considered to be blatantly overpowered. If a team had the opportunity to pick Leshruck, they would always take it. Consequently, the hero was banned most of the time, usually by the team that had second pick, since if they didn't ban him, the opponents would pick him before they got an opportunity to do so themselves. It's also worth mentioning that Sumail, EG's mid player, was incredible. Sumail could seemingly win games on his own. Leshruck, being primarily a mid hero at the time, meant that if Sumail got his hands on him, the game was practically over. Weirdly, CDAC wasn't even remotely in the same situation.
So someone just tweeted at me a stat that Shiki has 16 pop games with Leshruck over 4 years.
Okay.
That guy he does not play Leshruck mid.
Yeah.
Apparently.
CDAC's mid player had no Leshruck practice, and CDAC hadn't picked the hero a single time for the entire tournament. This all compounded into a bizarre perfect storm when CDAC and EG met for the third time in the grand finals of the International 5. EG realized that CDAC didn't know how to use Leshruck properly, and so they changed one important aspect of their game plan. They stopped banning Leshruck, even when going second in the draft. As I already mentioned, CDAC had two mandatory bans against EG, Naga Siren and Techies. However, they also couldn't let them have Leshruck, and they were only two first phase bans. This resulted in them first picking the hero in the first 3 matches of the grand finals. They basically had to surrender their first pick and use it as another ban, a ban that would also force them to play a hero they didn't want on their team. While Techies didn't get picked during the grand finals, EG won the International 5 because the hero had such a presence that CDAC couldn't allow him to be picked, pressuring them into a situation where they had no way to win the drafting stage. Techies' performance at the International 5 was spectacular. The teams that used him did so with great success, as the hero won 7 out of the 8 games that he played. On top of that, Techies was banned 13 times, including all of the upper bracket final and grand final games. Techies filled a unique and powerful role. I'm certain that if more teams had given the hero a chance, he would only have seen even more success. His low pick rate didn't stem from a lack of power, but instead from a lack of teams that took the hero seriously before the tournament. Techies undeniably played a major role in Evil Genius's victory at the International 5, and he can hold that crown with pride.
Okay, you can't just get by with just saying, we just decided to pick some techies, no big deal. You hate techies.
I do hate techies. Like, before this tournament, I asked some Dota 2 people to remove the hero or nerf him. With the petition and also like behind the scenes, and like I tried to get the hero nerfed because I thought he was gonna like ruin TI. When that hero's in the game, only he's having fun. That's how I feel about it.
And did you have fun playing him?
Of course, he's super fun.
Okay, so you want to ban him for everybody else, but you were happy to use him in game 2.
I mean, I'd be down if he's just removed from the game, but like, if he's in the game, we're gonna use it, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for watching the video so far. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. That would be absolutely fantastic. And subscribe to our channel. There are more videos coming, like for example the Juggernaut video in 2 weeks from now. Also, you can become a channel member. That is the best way to support us directly. By becoming a channel member, you will not only gain access to a bunch of bonus material, like for example the full versions of the interviews that we conducted, but also you gain access to the next 2 videos in the series, which are currently Juggernaut, as already mentioned, and then a really big and exciting one, IO. I'm really looking forward to the IO video. Becoming a channel member is really the best way to support us directly. Anyway, let's get back to Techies. In patch 6.85, Techies received a set of devastating changes to landmines. Their damage, mana cost and cooldown was all cut in half. This kept the mine's effectiveness the same and placed in stacks, but completely ruined them as individual spellcasts. The Techies and Tusk combo we saw at TI5 disappeared immediately, as Techies no longer did enough damage to justify it. Additionally, all of Techies' mines no longer exploded when destroyed. While he used to be able to shut out melee heroes from interacting with certain spots on the map, this was no longer possible. Especially because Quelling Blade could now be used to destroy mines, and most melee heroes carried Quelling Blades. Finally, landmines and stasis traps no longer blocked neutral creep camps. 6.85 ruined Techies. That may sound harsh, but ultimately that was the truth of it. The hero completely vanished from any competitive play. While he still had access to some of the strategies that made him good before, he could still deny kills and he could still protect his team while sieging. Unfortunately, none of that was enough to make up for his complete lack of early game. The new landmines were better at getting stacks of them down, but in competitive play you wouldn't really want to be doing that in the first place. AUI 2000's powerful early game zoning at TI5 relied heavily on a single mine being a threat that half the cast couldn't deal with, even if they saw it. Techies' pushing potential was also heavily reduced. Here's what AUI 2000 had to say on the matter.
We got Techies. What do we got here? Your favorite hero in the game.
Yeah, this is probably the biggest nerf drum out of all of these.
So they're no longer triggered when destroyed. So you can literally stand within, not range of obviously landmines, but to a point where you can just kill them and it will not blow up.
The 50% reduction is sort of big because you can't push towers as well. Because like, if you only have to go to a tower and place a mine once every 10 seconds, you're a lot safer. You do a lot like more clear.
Right.
Also, like it's easier to do a soul ring because you plant 1 mine and you're good. Now you have to like make sure you get 2 because 1 mine's not enough for soul. But it makes them better versus TA, and TA was the biggest tech. So that's sort of interesting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Techies was not set up for success at the International 6. He was picked in exactly 1 game, by Wings Gaming versus Digital Chaos in the upper bracket round 1, game 2. During game 1, Wings decidedly beat DC, using an aggressive Drow Ranger lineup. They felt untouchable, and so for game 2, Wings decided to have some fun. They picked Techies and Pudge, both of which were considered completely unplayable. You might think they had some sort of secret strategy planned, like using Pudge's meat hook to pull enemies into the landmines, but no. Wings had seemingly no idea what to do with both heroes, and the game was an absolute disaster. The most interesting strategy we saw in the game was Techies setting up a bunch of landmines in a large neutral camp before any of the creeps spawned in. When they did, Techies instantly killed the camp and effectively started the game at level 2. From here, Techies was used as a core, but Wings didn't have anyone to enable him. He kept being chased out of lanes and had nowhere to farm. After laning, Techies tried the split pushing strategy again, but his pushing power was nowhere near the same level it was a year ago, and so DC simply ignored him. The only noteworthy play Techies managed to pull the entire game was when Pudge hooked Timbersaw into a set of mines, killing him. Unfortunately, Timbersaw had a high stack Bloodstone, which reduced respawn times, and he was back in the fight immediately. Wings lost this game without being able to put up much of a fight. They were effectively playing 3 versus 5, as neither Techies nor Pudge were able to contribute in any significant way. After this game, Wings started playing seriously again, and destroyed DC in Game 3 and then proceeded to win the entire tournament. Clearly, the current iteration of Techies wasn't working. Valve decided that it was time for a larger rework. In 7.0, Techies had 3 of his abilities changed significantly. Landmines were removed and replaced with proximity mines. Proximity mines were still self-triggering mines, so the core idea of stepping into an area and then a mine explodes and you take damage remained. However, the specifics were quite different. Proximity mines dealt significantly more damage, up to 750 magic damage. Their mana costs and cooldowns were also increased again. While this much damage output may sound amazing, it came with some caveats. Proximity mines could not be placed within the radius of another proximity mine. This meant that the era of clusters of landmines was over, and it limited how much damage could be dealt at once. These mines were not able to one-shot enemies, as even in the early game all heroes would be able to tank 750 damage, although just barely. Don't get too excited about pushing either, as proximity mines only did 25% damage to buildings. Proximity mines also had a much longer activation and detonation delay. Combined, it took over 3 seconds to go from placing a mine to having it explode. Finally, proximity mines couldn't be detected by TrueSight, but would always be visible if a hero was in their trigger radius. Any hero could easily deal with a proximity mine if they ran into it, as it became visible for 1.6 seconds of detonation delay before activating, and required only 1 attack to be killed. 7.05 also added a loud noise that would be played after a hero stepped into a proximity mine, making it even easier to react. The really weird thing about this was how much they were worth when you destroyed them. Initially they had a bounty of 30 gold, which was then raised to 50 in 7.02. This was a lot of money and meant that using the mines carelessly would not only be useless, but actively helping the enemy team. Overall, proximity mines were much more powerful in their damage output than previous iterations had been, but they were also much easier to deal with. This was in part because Stasis Trap was also reworked. Instead of stunning, they would now root their targets. Stasis Traps no longer had a detonation delay and would trigger instantly if an enemy entered their radius. Their trigger radius was also reduced a small amount, but their effect radius was increased significantly. This allowed Stasis Trap to hit multiple units in a fairly big range. The combo here was clear. Hide proximity mines where opponents can't see them, then use Stasis Traps to keep them in the range of proximity mines for long enough for the mines to explode. Then use either remote mines or Techies' final new ability to finish off the opponent. Suicide Squad Attack was completely removed from the game and replaced with Blast Off. Blast Off was a long-range ability that allowed Techies to literally throw himself at the opponents. When he landed, he dealt significant damage in an AoE and applied a silence, while also dealing 50% of his own maximum health in damage to himself. This ability had a fairly short cooldown and could be used to deny himself. Remote mines were also slightly adjusted, gaining a detonation delay and reduced cast time. In 7.06, Techies also received a plus 250 attack damage talent at level 25. This was never competitively relevant, but it was very funny. This new skill set further pushed Techies into a defensive and controlling playstyle. Proximity mines were completely impossible to use aggressively. The delays were way too long, and in all likelihood you just gave the opponent 50 gold every time you attempted it. Proximity mines also couldn't be used effectively during laning, as they required setup, mana, levels, and Stasis Trap. His best early game tool was Blast Off, which dealt a lot of damage at level 1 and was fairly easy to use. The strategy was straightforward. Trade hits with the enemy support until you're low health, then use Blast Off to deal a huge burst of damage and deny yourself. While this strategy was reasonably good at applying pressure, it still meant that Techies wasn't really laning, as he spent a lot of time dead. Keep in mind what made Techies powerful at TI5. It was his Aghanim Scepter that allowed him to freely push lanes and support his team when sieging. Turns out it's very hard to farm an Aghanim Scepter and get level 2 ultimate if you spend your entire early game killing yourself. This may sound very similar to what we have seen before, but it's ultimately a difference of scale. Suicide Squad Attack pretty much guaranteed a kill when it was used, which was once every 2 minutes or so. Blastoff, on the other hand, had no such guarantee and only a 35-second cooldown. Techies would come into a lane and die over and over and over again, leaving him completely starved for gold and experience. Sometimes when Dota heroes received large-scale reworks, they also got removed from Captain's Mode for a while. Captain's Mode is the game mode used for tournaments, and so removing the hero from Captain's Mode effectively prohibited them from participating in competitive Dota 2. Usually, Valve made an effort to bring those heroes back by the time the International came around, but this wasn't the case here. With his new reworks, Techies was also removed from Captain's Mode and wasn't added back in time for the International 7. As a result, the hero couldn't be played, although realistically speaking, he probably wouldn't have seen much action anyway. After TI7, Techies received a variety of smaller buffs. His health and mana regeneration were increased, proximity mines had their damage buffed and bounty reduced, and his talents were made stronger. The most significant change during this period came because Tidehunter outrageously also received a plus 250 damage talent at level 25. To assure that Techies continued his dominance as the highest attack damage talent ever, his level 25 talent was buffed to give plus 251 damage. Turns out, this was actually what he had needed all along. Sometimes it's the last straw that spills a metagame's bucket. Techies switched over to a Hand of Midas farming base carry build that aimed to rush level 25 as quickly as possible, and then took over the game through sheer right-click power. Even the strongest carry struggled to compete with a free Divine Rapier, backed up by defensive mines protecting the longest attack range in the game. All he needed was some attack speed and he could break down buildings like it was nobody's business. With Hurricane Pike and 2 to 3 Moonshards, Techies became an unbeatable killing machine. Players in all skill brackets, from the lowest MMR trenches to the highest professional echelons, were calling for Nurse, but their god had forsaken them. The Frog abandoned his most faithful believers, and his final creation continued its path of destruction all the way to the International, being the first hero with a 100% ban rate. Nothing could stop Techies, nothing could stand in his way, and all anyone could do is grovel at his feet, begging for mercy and a swift death. Nah, I'm lying. These changes were nowhere near enough to push the hero into competitive viability, as they didn't address any of the problems he had. Techies went unpicked again at the International 8. However, he was banned once, but the sincerity of this ban is questionable.
They're gonna ban the Shaker. Look at that meme ban.
Is that a meme? It's got it.
It's 100%. Because they need a mid. They're not playing Techies mid.
You never know, man.
They're just that's VP. You know that clip of them laughing. I think it was Epicenter, one of the tournaments, where it's just like they bang on the desk. They're laughing. They're doing that right now. They're just like these guys. These guys are picking the same 4 heroes against each other.
Look at that icon. He's looking right at us. You know, he's just smiling like, ah.
We haven't talked much about items so far. That's because Techies' item build has remained the same ever since he was first added. Mana into Aghanor's Scepter. The only reason why I'm bringing items up at all is so that you don't think I forgot about them. It's just that none of the new implementations were relevant to the hero. Going into TI9, Techies received some minor number changes again. The most important was a mana cost and cooldown reduction for remote mines. More importantly, at this point Dota 2's overall game structure had changed and put more emphasis on cores, leading to dual lanes. As Techies already functioned best in dual lane setups, he appreciated this change. Techies was picked twice at the International 9. The first pick came from Team Secret in their second game against Chaos Esports Club during the group stages. This game didn't matter. That may sound like I'm being judgmental, but it objectively didn't matter. Both teams had already secured their placements for the main event. Team Secret was guaranteed second in their group and Chaos EC was knocked out. As a result, it was a bit of a weird game that felt like neither team was trying particularly hard. Techies performed very poorly in this match, but so did the rest of Secret. They just didn't play well. Ultimately, there isn't much to talk about here. Instead, I want to focus on the other Techies game at TI9. played by OG versus Vici Gaming in their first game during the group stages. Ultimately, the outcome here was also irrelevant, as OG was already guaranteed first in their group and VG guaranteed second. However, it was a tremendously entertaining game, and I would be doing you a disservice if we didn't dive into it. At the time, OG could do no wrong. They won the previous international and were playing incredibly well at this one, already having secured first in their group. Their style was very strange. It felt like an uncoordinated mess of players simply running at their opponents and then outplaying them in thousands of tiny micro-interactions. It was individualistic. They aimed to make all their players shine. If anyone could make Techies work, it was going to be OG. Techies starts the game by buying a lot of health regeneration. Blastoff deals a huge 300 damage at level 1, with a relatively low mana cost and cooldown. Jerax immediately starts spamming the ability whenever he gets an opportunity, while using consumables to keep his health high enough to stay in lane. When he eventually reaches a point of health where regeneration would take too long, he resets his resources by killing himself. OG plays the bottom lane very aggressively. Slaughter and Techies are always looking for a fight. Their main goal is to shut down the Alchemist as much as possible. This works fine. Alchemist struggles for a short while, but then manages to stabilize quickly. While Techies was able to apply a lot of pressure during the very early moments, as the heroes level up, 300 damage stops being impressive. Particularly after Alchemist gets his ultimate, Jerax becomes unable to significantly hinder him. Part of this stems from Techies' skill build. Instead of leveling up Blastoff, he has to get points into proximity mines and stasis trap to enable his primary combo. Blastoff doesn't even scale that nicely, and he is a support, so all of his skill points are precious. DE will be staying at level 1, proximity mines are the priority. This is where the game starts being fun. As laning concludes, Jerax moves into the jungle.
Would want to and then like take favorable fights. What's the next move then? I mean the next move, I think they have to play Techies Dota, just mine this like things up and play from there, like kind of play around the mines. He's just joking him around.
The advantage of a high ground ward.
Did you see him at all? I don't think so.
He's so confused. Where's these Techies? What's going on?
If he actually runs in and
he's
dies
gonna
to
run
it.
into the stasis trap.
Oh
He pulls
my
around
God.
the and Jerax gets him. Oh, the ring around the rosy of death. Jerax, he's gonna try and go for the suicide, but fortunately, DY. Fast.
In the meantime, Alchemist finishes up a Radiance, and Mirana keeps finding good kills around the map. Vici Gaming is looking strong, and OG realizes they have to slow down the Alchemist. Techies sets up a trap in the top lane, and OG moves to chase Alchemist into the mines.
I'm doing a public service.
I don't think they should remove Techies from Dota.
I don't think so either. I think he's a funny hero. Look at this.
He's really a funny hero, you know? He's
Dude, look at
just
this. They're
staying there.
going to sandwich Vici Gaming right now. They're actually going to chase him into the mines that Jerax is laid out by the tower. If they try and go back to the tower, they're dead. Paparazzi's just running straight left, but instead he runs into a stasis trap. He does manage to blink himself away thanks to the Aphotic Shield. A fast blink out, and now an arrow nails Zeb. Paparazzi says it's time to come back. The reinforcements are here. The call has been made. Vici Gaming going to just kite out, and he'll slowly take away.
They're all
Look at
trying to
OG.
make it to the mines.
They're just making it to the mines. They're saying, please, no. Jerax, save us, anything, but Vici Gaming have no
they're running
remorse.
to the mines.
No tail.
No tail.
He
Running
stands
to
on
the
top of the mines, blowing the suicide and gets in the ultra kill! OG, they got wiped, but at least they brought Vici Gang down with them.
What a bait. What a bait. You saw No Tail, he hit right on top of them.
Jerax is now the highest level in the game, but can't leverage his newly acquired Aghanim Scepter to push, and the game slows down to a crawl. Despite the Dire's best efforts, the Radiant continues to get further and further ahead. Techies is doing his best to buy his team space, placing remote mines in various spots around the map. Interestingly, he puts a lot of effort into controlling lanes with the mines, always pushing the creep base back before they get near any towers. Unfortunately, that's not how you win the game, that's how you delay losing. Additional farming time is not in OG's favor. Alchemist continues getting richer and richer and richer. Soon he has twice the net worth of the top Dire farmer. Vici Gaming decides to force the issue.
Maybe he was mining the bottom side first.
Oh, we got the arrow on Anna. Anna taking a lot of damage. They don't want to overcommit.
They're trying to get back to the mines. They're all just trying to get to the mines.
No-Tail doesn't have a force sap or anything. I feel like this is kind of obvious as they do have the detection down. Tops is going to jump right in, though. He does have the Wukong's command. Gets it out before the unstable concoction, but paparazzi, he does so much damage. He's going to be pulled back into the Wukong's command, though. And Thompson getting all of that life steal is actually healing up. Same as Anna.
They're both dead.
They survived through all of those Mjolnir shots until Yang and Fade recommit with the freezing field. It's a good one. They do have the silence going out as well as the crush. Seb healing up inside of his river. He got him. He finally pulled him into the mines. He knew it was there too.
They're going to get another one.
They're going to get another one. They're going to jump on top of Yang, who has the corrosive haze, so he just gets one shot. That's a team wipe for OG.
This fight may seem like a big deal, because OG just team wiped their opponents. You have to keep in mind though, that a lot of that money landed on a Techies. VG spends another 5 minutes farming up, and then finishes the game. Jirax really put up a fight, but ultimately wasn't able to transform that into an active presence. Techies wasn't like most heroes. He couldn't just throw out a magic missile and an ultimate during a teamfight and be happy about his contribution. Techies required time. Time that became more and more scarce as Dota developed to be more about teamfighting. Syndarin summed it up pretty nicely here.
What's happening right now to me is the perfect showcase of Techies' biggest weakness, is if you're not set up, the hero sucks. Like, it's just bad.
After the International 9, Techies received some nice buffs right away. Proximity mines now had 3 charges instead of a simple cooldown. This allowed for much greater efficiency when placing them. His Aghanim Scepter was also reworked to increase the cast range of all his mines instead of just his ultimates. Then a series of minor changes followed until 7.28, when Techies got an Aghanim's Shard that increased Blastoff's cast range and made it stun in addition to its other effects. This was a very powerful effect and was made even stronger when they increased the stun AoE shortly after. Much more importantly, his level 25 talent was buffed from plus 251 damage to plus 252. This time it truly made Techies a powerful attacker, so much so that they even had to nerf his base attack speed from 100 to 90. I'm obviously lying again, except they did actually nerf his attack speed, and I have no idea why. I'm guessing for flavor reasons, but there was no sensible balanced justification. A few patches ago, Techies received a level 25 talent that gave his mines a tiny amount of movement speed. Unfortunately, at the time the movement speed bonus was too small to do anything with, which is why I hadn't brought it up. 7.25 tripled that movement speed bonus to 75, and now Techies could actually reasonably move his mines across the map. This was very silly and led to many ancients being blown up out of nowhere and many teams traumatized by a horde of mines slowly approaching them. Was this used in competitive play? No, absolutely not, but it was still hilarious. Right before TI-10, Valve increased the tower damage of proximity mines and then unleashed Techies onto the tournament. For the third time, Techies went unpicked. Unbanned as well. This iteration of Techies wasn't working. The main problem was really conceptual. What exactly was his purpose? TI-5 Techies was good at applying pressure early, split pushing, making enemies terrified to move around the map because they might die instantly to a stack of landmines, and reinforcing his team while they are sieging. But the changes Valve implemented over the years took away nearly all of that. He could still apply some pressure early, but nowhere near as much, and any traditional support would do more damage in the long run, simply because they actually have attack damage that they can use to harass. Another of his strong suits, split pushing, was gone. Blastoff wasn't a reliable way to deny yourself. Limiting enemy movement was still possible, but nowhere near as much. Landmines could kill at any point in the game out of nowhere, which was terrifying. On the other hand, proximity mines would at most deal a lot of damage, but couldn't kill. If somebody bought a Hood of Defiance to get magic resistance and health regeneration, they wouldn't have to worry about them at all. The only thing Techies had left was reinforcing his team while sieging. Sadly, Dota as a whole had moved away from that. The game used to have a lot of fights around objectives. Now you had fights and took objectives afterwards. Your team didn't need reinforcement during a push, because you already killed the opponents. But you did need help getting those kills in the first place, and that's something Techies just couldn't do reliably. It was time for another rework. Techies had his stats normalized, meaning he actually had some attack damage now. Proximity mines replaced remote mines as his new ultimate. They had their numbers adjusted and now reduced affected enemies' magic resistance. The new proximity mines also regained the old property of landmines, where they dealt less damage if you were too far away. Remote mines were completely removed. Techies' new Q ability was Sticky Bomb. Sticky Bomb let Techies throw a projectile to a target location. If it landed near an enemy hero, it would stick to and slow them. After a few seconds, the Sticky Bomb would explode, dealing damage in an AoE and applying a short slow. This ability had a fairly low cooldown and reasonable mana cost. It was a spammable, easy to use spell. Stasis Trap was also completely removed. In its place, Techies gained Reactive Taser. Reactive Taser was a self buff that increased Techies' movement speed for a short while. If Techies was attacked during this period, he would apply a disarm to his attacker. At the end of the buff duration, Reactive Taser would explode, applying the disarm to any enemy in an AoE. His Aghanim Scepter was reworked to allow him to cast Reactive Taser on allies, and made it deal some damage with the explosion. This rework of the Aghanim Scepter also removed Minefield Sign from the game. However, Minefield Sign may never be touched without outrage, and the community complained loudly and aggressively about its removal. Valve immediately caved and added it back into the game as a purely cosmetic ability. Finally, Blast Off could no longer be used to deny yourself and had its numbers adjusted. As with any rework, the following patches included a lot of minor adjustments. In summary, Blast Off had its self-damage reduced significantly. It used to deal 50% of Techies' maximum health at all levels, but now it went down all the way to 20% of his current health. The ability also had its damage scaled down, meaning it was much more important to level up now. Reactive Taser was changed to include an offensive dispel on targets that attack into it. Its Aghanim Scepter was also buffed to deal its damage to enemies that attack into it as well. Finally, Minefield Sign was made a real ability again. Its cooldown and duration were significantly reduced, and it gained a lengthy cast point. The effect remained essentially the same, giving invulnerability to proximity mines placed underneath it. These changes didn't come without controversy. While many players were delighted at no longer having to deal with Techies mining the entire map, others argued that they turned an interesting and unique hero into something generic. I sat down with regular TI talent and Techies aficionado Sir Action Slacks and had a chat with him about the changes Techies received over the years.
Hi everybody, I am Sir Action Slacks. Techies is my hero. 1,597 official games on the hero with a almost 60% win rate. This hero represents me. This is the hero that made me fall in love with Dota. To me, the quintessential representation of Dota. Dota players are sickos. They're masochists. They can play any game they want, and they choose to play the most brutal, nightmarish game available. And Techies is very much that. A hero that is designed only with the passion to win. Winning means everything. If it takes 4 hours to win that game, you are going to win. And that's Dota players in a nutshell, baby. Or at least it used to be. Pro players don't know how to play Techies, alright? Owie 2000 hated Techies. Now, let me actually get this on the record here, because he has told me many times that Owie 2000 does know the strength of Techies, but he legitimately hated them. And this is not a joke, but Owie hated Techies a lot. He had always hated Techies because he thought that it was a different kind of playstyle that did not belong in Dota. And I can attest that this is true because I literally argued with him before TI5. There are interviews out there where Owie does say that he watched my Techies content to figure out how to play Techies along with PPD's brother, Robovice. And he understood the power of the burst damage. But what he hated was Techies' meta gameplay. He despised the having to sit back and lure people into traps. He only saw them for their worst quality, which was burst damage, big magical burst damage. However, he also did pay huge attention to their abilities to manipulate the lane. One of the best things about Techies is being able to put red mines in the lane and counter any kind of split pushing or any kind of like pushing at all, even if you lose a team fight. Those were the good things to do back in the day. Sneak in, mine up the lane all the way, and no creeps can push, no backdoor protection. Aoi took such advantage of massive burst damage in that TI from the explosions, and all he would do was put some mines in the lanes to prevent pushing. But he despised the hero in general. He's everything about the hero besides magical burst damage, he said was, inefficient, stupid, and just only for sickos. He didn't understand. And yet he was our leader. And that's such a dark thing for Techies players all around. We looked up to him. We said, Techies can be good. Look at this man. However, our leader, he was the Manchurian Techie, the Manchurian candidate. He went in there and he ruined it in a way that he said that he wanted to. He said he wanted to play Techies at TI so that it got deleted from the game. Absolutely detestable human being. Very good friend. Detestable human being. Horrible, man. Yeah. The reason why he wasn't good in pro games is because pro gamers have zero imagination when it comes to macro. That's what their coach is for. That's what their manager is for. Me go in here to last hit. And that's why they hated him so. It's because they didn't want to think about what their enemies wanted to do. They just wanted to think about the numbers, the money ball. Boring, okay? He's a pub hero because the real sick freaks, that's what we like. We play the RTS. We want to think about breaking the enemy more than, our tiny little numbers. That is my theory. I seen Fear try to play Techies. The dude doesn't get it. They don't get it. They just think he's about magical burst damage. That's all they ever thought. They didn't understand the nuances of economy draining, sanity draining, map control awareness. They just didn't understand, bro. Dota 2 is about finding something that is broken, that no one else knows is broken, and then showing the world. Aoi did it at TI5. He knew Techies was good. Just because Arteezy plays Razor in a pub, and then everyone else plays Razor in a pub, and then they go to TI, those guys all lose. It's about finding the genius, the gems, the hidden diamonds, understanding their strengths, seeing the potential, and making them real. That is the heart of Dota, is to find what everyone considers garbage and making it gold. You don't just delete it. You don't just put it into a furnace. Yeah, sure. Techies was garbage since TI5 in competitive because I didn't want to learn how to play the hero. When's the last time you saw AA? It doesn't matter, right? He's garbage now, but he'll be good later when somebody has the knowledge. The problem was, my friend, is that only the smartest people could be good at Techies. Only the coaches, the managers. There's a reason why Aoi 2000 was the one who spammed Techies, because he was the genius. He just won another TI as a coach, man. The guy thinks about Dota. He knows human psychology. That's it. We could have had a heyday with Techies. He could have come back. He was in a fine spot. People were experimenting, and then they nuked him just because people didn't like him. All right? And because people didn't like him because they didn't understand him. That is my theory. So what could have been done with Techies? Just let him be a piece of garbage. Let him have his 42% win rate that he used to have pre-rework in the pubs. Just let him exist, because the people that loved him, and we haven't loved anything since.
The question remains, were these changes worth it? Did Techies see competitive play? No. Techies yet again went unpicked and unbanned for the entirety of the International 11. Even if we include the 360 qualifier games, Techies only got picked in 5 of them, and none of the teams that played him made it to the International. Techies is a weird one. His story starts out a huge success. Underrated, underestimated. He showed up to the International 5 and all of the few teams that took him seriously and practiced how to play him were rewarded for their efforts. Evil geniuses won because of it. He wasn't just good, he was terrifying. However, it seemed like Valve didn't like how the hero saw his success, and so they changed him. They changed him over and over again, and none of those iterations worked. Even though he technically saw play at tier 6 and 9, those games weren't the most sincere. 2 of them didn't matter, and the final one came from Wings. Techies may be one of the rare cases where all of the reworks did more harm than good. What remains are questions. What do we want from Techies? What do we expect of him? Unfortunately, I don't think Valve currently has a good answer. Now you might expect me to say that Techies is the worst Dota hero of all time. But I do believe that a good argument can be made for that. I disagree. Yes, he effectively only saw play at one tournament, but he crushed that tournament. He had a performance that most can only dream of. A performance so good that his overall win rate at the International is still the highest out of all Dota heroes. Other heroes may have been picked more often, and they may have a more optimistic future. But at the very least, Techies had one tournament where all of us had our minds blown. Thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate it. And thank you very much everybody to the overwhelming response to our new channel here. I mean, at the time of recording this, the patch video has 125,000 views, which is kind of crazy considering it's only been out there for 2 weeks on a brand new channel. So thank you very much for all of the support. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you enjoyed the Techies video. As we already said, the Juggernaut video is coming in only 2 weeks from now, and then after that we've got the IO video a month later. And I kind of want to be clear about this, we're gonna have a monthly schedule going forward. We just prepared a bunch of early material so we can fill up the channel a little bit. But I hope you enjoyed the video today. As always, thank you very much to spectral.gg for being fantastic and being a great service with all of the stats and being just incredibly helpful. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to Metafy. We have partnered with Metafy to put our video series on their service as well. So if you're curious to see it on their website, metafy.gg, you can also find it there. There's a link in the description that you can check out. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.